In the early 20th century, the Lower East Side was the site of a lot of immigration, right? But in the late 20th and early 21st century, it's really the outer boroughs and places like Queens. So I spent a lot of time in Queens and ultimately spent the most time out here in Flushing and was dazzled by the diversity of the place. What was interesting was actually the religious diversity of the place. If you venture out, and we'll see part of this today, everything from an old Quaker meeting house, which is the oldest place in continual use in New York City. It was built in 1694. Around the corner from that, we'll go down Bowne Street, which is named after a very important Flushing figure named John Bowne, B-O-W-N-E. He and other residents of Flushing sought to defend Flushing's town charter, which was the earliest town charter in colonial America to grant liberty of conscience or religious freedom in 1645. When a new governor of New Netherland, Peter Stuyvesant, arrived in 1647, before he came, the Dutch were pretty relaxed about enforcing the state church, which was the Dutch Reformed Church. But when Stuyvesant came, he decided to crack down on religious minorities and enforce the official state religion, and this led to protests, especially here in Flushing, or Vlissingen as it was originally called, V-L-I-S-S-I-N-G-E-N. That proved to be too hard for the British to say later on, so anglicized into Flushing. The people of Flushing were upset with Stuyvesant's cracking down on religious minorities, and they drafted something in 1657 known as the Flushing Remonstrance, which was the earliest defense of the idea of religious freedom in the colonies. Stuyvesant wasn't impressed with that, though, and he jailed everyone who was affiliated, the signers of it, ultimately, for a few years later, 1662, John Bowne, who I mentioned a minute ago, he welcomed Quakers into his house. He had just become a Quaker himself, married a Quaker woman named Hannah Feek, and welcomed Quakers into his house. So he was in turn arrested and jailed by Stuyvesant and then banished from the colony. So he traveled around for a while and eventually made his way to Holland and appealed his case to the Dutch West India Company and brought them a copy of the town charter. So look here, we have this right, it was guaranteed. And ultimately they sent him back with a letter to Stuyvesant saying, look, we don't like religious minorities as much as you do either, but guess what? It's good for business.